So last night, as we were going to sleep, Daniel said something about, well, we've been married 5 years. We're 5 years into this. And I was like, dear, first of all, we've been married 6 years. And he said, oh man, we're coming up on 7 years. What's that thing people say about 7 years? The 7-year itch. He's like, yep, we're coming up on it.
Exactly.
And I thought, what a great piece of wisdom that I would have needed to hear in the beginning of marriage.
What was the wisdom then?
The wisdom is to throw out all the preconceived notions that people tell you about what this year will be like, what that year will be like, because it can really mess with your head.
As we are, like, our marriage is so different from everybody else's marriage because no one is in this marriage but you and me. So what is there to compare to, other people on what? Like, no one is in the exact situation like we are.
And I think there's a lot of different opinions, right? People are like, oh, the first year of marriage is so hard. And then you're in it and you're like, it might be hard for you. Or you might be like, oh my gosh. And you're so fearful about how hard it's going to be. Or like the 7-year itch, right? The 7-year itch, they say, is like by 7 years, you're kind of getting bored of each other. You're kind of getting sick of each other. And then you're like itching to get out of the marriage and you start looking at other people and that whole thing. And I just think it really sets you up for misery in the sense like, oh my gosh, the 7th year is coming. Like, are we going to hate each other? And, are you out of the blue going to be like, well, I wish I was married to a different woman. And it really, when you internalize those timelines, those preconceived notions about marriage and what it will be like, it can really freak you out to dread the first year of marriage or to dread the 7th year of marriage or whatever it is. I feel like there's not any past the 1st and the 7th year.
Well, I think even the honeymoon phase, people say, oh my gosh, the honeymoon phase is going to be so great. But maybe you're arguing a lot in the honeymoon phase, or maybe it's not as smooth as you thought it would be, and you're thinking, well, we should be having all this fun, and we should be all smiles. We were just married, whatever. We're married for 2 months, and we're already running into issues. Well, that's just the reality maybe for you, and that doesn't mean that's going to last forever or anything like that. But there is no such thing as a single silver bullet of this is what marriage is, and you have to be at this point, hop on the timeline as you chug along.
I think that's the core reality that your marriage, right? I'm speaking maybe to the newlyweds out there, or if you're going to get married, or if you are married now. Your marriage is unique. Our marriage is unique in the sense that we're two unique individuals on the unique timeline that God has for us, for our family, with all of the unique personality characteristics and quirks and great things and not so great things that we each bring into the marriage. It's so unique. I would go back and tell myself, like, your marriage is unique. It's one of a kind. And when you internalize that, it really gives you the confidence to not compare your, like, anything to that of other people.
Yeah, and that goes for dating as well, right? People say, oh, if you're dating for whatever, a year and a half, or isn't it time to get engaged? Or if you're, when is it going to get serious then? Or what, there's all these timelines, I feel, in dating as well, that there's standards and there's things saying, hey, if it's, by this, then you must be really serious, or when should you meet his or her family, or when does this happen, or when is that step? But just to say for yourself, hey, listen, we're in this together, and as it comes along, we'll do it. Obviously, you have to be, it's not like,
proactive,
oh, I'm just going to sit back and everything's going to come to me.
Yes.
No, and obviously through dating and marriage, there's a lot of work that you have to put in. We've talked about that in the past, but I think comparison is such a big thing that just seeps into everything. You know what I mean? Because the culture portrays this picture and holds something in front of your face every single day for anytime you look on a phone or a computer or whatever it is. There's something there at every point. There's this mirror being held in front of you, but inside of the mirror, you know what I mean? This is the thing. Have you gone to those bathrooms that have those, like, the displays inside of a mirror? You know what I mean? Like,
no.
You go to the bathroom, like a bar or whatever it is, you wash your hands and there's like a display. There's like a TV in the mirror looking back at you.
Is that a Dutch thing? I've never seen that.
I'm sure it's here as
well.
No, I'm sure it's here as well. I'm sure. I've seen it here in the States
We
as well.
don't go to a lot of bars. We're kind of busy with the boys at night.
But in general, right? So basically what it is, it's basically a mirror being held, the point I'm trying to make is this: you're trying to look back, you think you see yourself, but it's actually somebody else looking back at you inside of this mirror. You know what I mean? And they're trying to, sell you something or do something. But the thing is...
Very good analogy.
Right? That's what's being portrayed to you. Like, this is where you should be, and this is what it is. And that's how, I think we've perceived it as well through dating and into marriage and all that. This is how it should be, or this is what you're going to expect, so prepare for this already. Or, you're going to have, your first kid, prepare for this. Which is, there's a lot of good advice, 100%, but that doesn't mean that everything is going to happen what in general happens, so to speak. You know what I mean? A lot of it will, but it's going to be completely different because it's your own individual experience of something, and it's not always how it gets portrayed or how people tell you how to, live your life, basically. I think I'm going off.
No, I think you are on the rails. I think one of the most difficult things about accepting and being confident in your unique relationship or marriage is the comments of other people. To say, well, Susie and Dan have been dating for less time than you and they're already engaged, right? So what's the deal with you two?
Yeah.
And people asking and poking and prodding. When you internalize and establish yourself in the reality of the uniqueness of your relationship or your marriage, it gives you confidence in those conversations to say, I'm not going to be fazed by the fact that this person is saying, well, look at Susie and Dan. I'm going to say, well, that's fine. I am so confident in the unique nature and the unique path of our relationship that what Susie and Dan are doing does not matter to me.
Yeah.
I celebrate them. That's wonderful. Having that confidence in God's plan for your own life, right, as an individual and your own marriage, if that's what you're in, it is so freeing.
Yeah, and I think the key thing what you said as well is through God and having faith and really honestly and earnestly discerning those things, because it can also easily become an excuse. So let's say you're in a relationship for 4.5, 5 years and you're, and you're like, we've been dating for a long time. And you're like, hi, you talk to your significant other, we've been dating for a long time. And the guy's like, yeah, but didn't you hear the video by Emily? You know what I mean? And they're just saying, this is my own timeline or whatever. And obviously there's no actual, discernment or anything like that underneath that. You know what I mean? Like it can't be an excuse to say, let's just keep putting something off because
Totally.
I don't feel this is my timeline yet. So then that's where you yourself come together as well and say, hey, listen, I've been actively discerning this and really thinking about this, and I want to talk and do all these things and not just sit back and let it happen, because if you do that, nothing is eventually going to happen. You know what I mean? Or very little.
I agree with you, and I think it's so important to highlight the difference between just dragging discernment on and having discernment, because people are actually working through things, right? Some couples date for multiple years because they have trauma to deal with. They have to be in counseling together to have these things that they have to work through either individually or together, right? There are people who bring a lot of stuff into relationships, and it takes them longer to navigate those things as an individual and collectively, right? And it's not up to anyone to say, oh, well, you've been dating them 3.5 years, like you're dragging on your discernment. It's up to the individual and the couple together to really do that soul searching to say, well, are we just letting our discernment drag on, or is there a point to the time that we're taking to do this?
Yeah, or is there a fear of commitment, or is it, what are these things that's, withholding us from, taking the next step, whatever that might be.
Yes, I think that's very important to not use our relationship is unique as an excuse to just not do anything or not have an end goal in sight or in mind to dating, because dating ultimately should be for a purpose. It should be, as people of faith, for us, dating was for marriage. It was for discerning whether this person is the person God is calling me to marry in my life. And so ultimately there always should be an end goal and a purpose for that. For both of us, I think that's one of the strengths that we have in our marriage, is not being concerned with what other people have ever been doing, except the two of us.
Yeah, and I think you and I actually bring that up in conversations at times. We'll say, not to compare, you know what I mean? Because it is easy. It's always easy to compare, because then you have a benchmark to go off of something. And in some cases, it's good to have a benchmark, right? Because then you can measure your progress as well. With things that are not objective, but subjective, how, you raise your kids and how there's no one set rule on how to do that. There's no real benchmark for it as well either.
But it's also the question of you're in a marriage together and raising your kids, you're how do other people do this?
Yeah.
Are we totally off here?
Exactly, and that's great.
Because you don't get an insider look into anybody else's marriage.
Yeah.
Right? You had your parents' marriage and you only saw so much of it, right? I'm speaking for both of us, I suppose. Mm-hmm. I don't know what your experience was, but you don't get a 24/7 look into the marriage or family life of anybody else. So that question is always how are other people doing this? Not in the sense of let's compare, but
let's get some insider, scoop, so to speak, to help us along. Yeah.
So that's just a funny question always. It's everybody does everything differently, and you just figure it out together along the way in your own unique relationship, home, family.
Timeline, yeah.
We just want to share that, put that in your pocket. We're throwing out the 7-year itch, doom and gloom in the trash. If you have any questions, let us know in the comments. I'll try to answer as many as I can. Subscribe to my channel over here. Bing! And press the bell. Ding! For notifications about when we post new videos or I post a new video alone.
Who knows?
Who knows? All right, talk to you soon. Bye.
We're on our own timeline.
We sure are.